Everyone believed in the city Evara had married up. Nolan, handsome, ambitious, and polished, had taken a quiet village girl as his wife. People whispered in offices, markets, and even in cafes. How did she land him? They assumed her life had changed for the better, but no one saw the chains hidden behind luxury. Luck, they said, but Evara knew it was something darker, a gilded trap disguised as love. Evara's beauty was subtle, impossible to ignore. Her skin glowed with the softness of sunrise. Her eyes held quiet intelligence, and her gentle smile could melt even the hardest hearts. Yet Nolan dismissed all of it. He noticed only what she lacked: polish, confidence, and sophistication. Every compliment he gave other women was a wound, a reminder that Evara was too village for him. "Why do you dress like that? Why can't you talk properly?" he asked once, laughing softly in front of friends. Humiliation dripped from his tone. Guests laughed awkwardly. Evara lowered her eyes, swallowed her pride, and learnt silence. At home, the small kindnesses of life became battlegrounds. Her words were measured, her smiles calculated, even her laughter controlled. Each day she shrank further, retreating into the shadows of herself just to survive Nolan's soft cruelty. Nights were worst. Alone, staring at the ceiling, she prayed not for love, not for happiness, but for strength to endure the slow erosion of her dignity. She felt trapped, confined by the very person who promised to protect and cherish her. Nolan believed he had rescued her from her village life. But rescue, she learnt, was not always freedom. Sometimes it was a gilded cage. And as Evara silently endured, she clung to one fragile hope: her best friend, Lyra. Little did she know, the person she trusted most would soon become the architect of her suffering. The one she leaned on, cried to, and shared secrets with was quietly weaving threads that could destroy her life from the inside. Lyra had been Evara's closest companion since childhood. They were both from the same village. But Lyra went to live in the city with her parents at a very early age. She reconnected with Evara after a long time when Evara got married and moved to the city with her husband, Nolan. Lyra was bold, flashy, and outspoken. She lived with confidence and laughter that drew attention wherever she went. Evara, shy and gentle, had always admired her friend, believing her strength would protect her from city life storms, especially in a city she has not known before now. But trust is a dangerous thing when wielded by someone with hidden motives. Every tear Evara shed, every whispered complaint about Nolan, every secret worry, Lyra carefully recorded them in her memory and delivered them to Nolan in subtle, calculated ways. She presented Evara's frustrations as evidence of village ignorance and inability to adapt. When Evara called Lyra for comfort, Lyra's soothing words, "Be patient, endure, he doesn't understand yet," were also weapons, convincing Nolan that her wife was unworthy, difficult, and lacking refinement. Slowly, the seed of doubt took root in Nolan's mind. He compared Evara to Lyra and other women who carried themselves with confidence and boldness. Her quietness became weakness, her patience dullness. The house that should have been a sanctuary became a prison. Every glance Evara cast, every step she took was scrutinized. Every smile, every gesture of love was discounted, replaced by subtle criticism. And yet, Evara trusted Lyra completely, unaware that the friend she had leaned on the most was actively shaping her downfall. What felt like protection was in fact betrayal. Lyra's eyes were warm in public, her laughter sincere, but behind closed doors, she orchestrated misunderstandings and planted doubts, tightening the walls around Evara's world. By the time Evara realized the truth, the damage would be irreversible, and the person she believed would shield her from harm would become the reason her world fell apart. The change did not happen suddenly. It crept in like smoke, silent and suffocating. Nolan grew colder, his words sharper, his patience thinner. Where he once ignored Evara, he now watched her closely, as if waiting for her to fail. Small mistakes became evidence. A meal served late, a question asked twice, a quiet sigh mistaken for disrespect. Each time, Nolan's voice rose with disappointment, and Ifara's heart sank deeper. She tried harder, she woke earlier, spoke less, smiled more. She dressed the way Lyra suggested, practiced speaking more refined, and studied how city women carried themselves. Still, nothing pleased Nolan. His comparisons became louder. Why can't you be like Lyra? She understands things quickly. She knows how to speak. Each comparison cut like a blade. Ifara nodded, apologized, and blamed herself. At night, when the house fell silent, Ifara called Lyra with trembling hands. She poured out her pain, unaware that every word was fuel to the fire consuming her home. Lyra listened patiently, offering sympathy coated in poison. Men like Nolan need respect, she said softly. You must be careful not to frustrate him. Ifara thanked her, believing she was being guided, not guided into ruin. Meanwhile, Lyra met Nolan under the guise of concern. She spoke gently, pretending to defend Ifara while subtly tearing her apart. She's trying, Lyra would say, but you know village upbringing, some habits are hard to erase. Nolan nodded, his disappointment hardening into contempt. The image of his wife began to rot in his mind. Soon, the house itself felt hostile. Conversations stopped mid-sentence when Ifara entered. Nolan's phone was always turned away. Laughter existed only when she was absent. She felt like a guest overstaying her welcome in her own home. And yet, through it all, Ifara still trusted Lyra. She did not know that the cracks in her marriage were being widened deliberately, patiently, by the very hands she reached for when she felt herself falling apart. The night everything shifted began quietly, too quietly. Nolan came home late, his face unreadable, his steps heavy with unspoken anger. Ifara sensed danger, but did not know its shape. She greeted him softly, her voice trembling with hope. He did not respond. Instead, he sat down, stared at her for a long moment, and sighed deeply. I'm tired, he said at last. Tired of pretending. The words struck him like thunder. Nolan accused her of things she had never done. Disrespect, manipulation, ingratitude. He claimed she embarrassed him, drained him, and held him back. Confused and shaken, Ifara tried to defend herself, but every word only worsened his anger. He spoke with confidence, as if rehearsed, as if someone had prepared him for this moment. Then he said something that froze her blood. Even Lyra agrees, he said calmly. She understands me. She sees what you refuse to change. Ifara's heart shattered. Lyra? Her anchor? Her protector? She struggled to breathe as realization crept in slowly, painfully. Memories replayed themselves, Lyra's advice, her warnings, her constant comparisons. The comfort she once felt now tasted bitter. The room spun as truth knocked against her denial. That night, Ifara cried alone, her tears soaking into the pillow like secrets too heavy to carry. She did not sleep. Instead, she watched the ceiling and listened to the sound of her marriage collapsing quietly beside her. Trust, once broken, does not shatter loudly. It dissolves. By morning, something inside Ifara had changed. The pain remained, but beneath it stirred awareness. She no longer felt only weak and confused. She felt watched, manipulated, and betrayed. The village girl everyone underestimated was beginning to see clearly, and though she did not know how or when, Ifara understood one thing with terrifying certainty. Someone she loved had carefully designed her suffering. Evara stopped crying the day she started listening differently, not to Nolan's words, but to the fear hiding behind them. She noticed how his voice changed whenever money, respect, or public opinion came up, how his confidence faded the moment someone questioned his authority, how his cruelty always arrived after moments he felt small. It was subtle, but once she saw it, she couldn't unsee it. She remembered the stories Nolan once shared late at night: an absent father who ruled through intimidation, a mother who survived by silence, a childhood where mistakes were punished, not corrected. Nolan had learned early that softness invited pain. Control was safety. Perfection was protection. Evara realized something unsettling. Nolan wasn't attacking her because she was weak. He was attacking her because her calm unsettled the chaos inside him. Instead of confronting him, Evara changed her approach. She stopped defending herself unnecessarily. She spoke with quiet certainty. When Nolan lashed out, she did not shrink, but she did not fight either. She acknowledged his fears without naming them. "We're safe," she said once during an argument. The word stunned him. Safe was not a language he understood. At the same time, Evara became observant around Lyra. She noticed how Lyra's advice always positioned Evara as the problem, how her concern thrived on crisis, how her presence increased tension rather than eased it. Lyra smiled too easily when Evara spoke of pain. That was when she knew. Some people don't want to help you heal. They want to study how you break. Quietly, Evara began rebuilding her home from the inside. She restored routines Nolan had abandoned. She encouraged his strengths without feeding his ego. She challenged him gently, forcing him to face discomfort without humiliation. Nolan resisted at first, confused by her steadiness, but slowly something shifted. The argument softened. The silence became thoughtful, not hostile. Lyra, unaware of the change, pushed harder. Her comments became sharper, her visits more frequent. She sensed control slipping and tried to reclaim it by amplifying doubt. But what she didn't know was that the foundation she relied on, division, was already cracking beneath her feet. The real test came when Nolan failed publicly. A deal collapsed. Whispers followed him home. The old Nolan would have erupted, blame, anger, withdrawal. Instead, he froze. Evara saw the child behind the man, terrified of being exposed as not enough. That night, she did something unexpected. She did not comfort him with praise or excuses. She sat beside him in silence, unafraid. "It didn't destroy you," she said softly. "You're still here." The words struck deeper than comfort ever could. Nolan felt something loosen inside him, fear meeting reality and surviving it. Over the following weeks, he changed, slowly, unevenly, but genuinely. He listened more. He questioned his own reactions. For the first time, he admitted, quietly, that control had never made him feel secure. Lyra noticed the shift immediately. Nolan no longer confided in her. Evara no longer sought her counsel. The house felt close to her. Desperate, Lyra tried to provoke conflict, hinting at betrayal, exaggerating misunderstandings. But the reaction she fed on never came. The couple spoke privately, they clarified, they stood together. The moment Lyra realized she had lost was devastating. Nolan calmly told her she was no longer welcome in their home. No accusations, no explanations, just boundaries. Evara watched silently as Lyra's confidence collapsed into disbelief. For the first time, Lyra was irrelevant. Cut off from the environment she manipulated, Lyra unraveled. Patterns repeated, friendships failed, relationships crumbled. Eventually, faced with her own reflection and unable to escape it, she entered therapy, not because Evara or Nolan pushed her, but because her methods stopped working.
Healing did not arrive like a celebration. It arrived quietly, in moments Nolan never thought mattered. The way Evara waited before responding instead of reacting. The way she asked questions instead of accusations. the way she held space for his silence without demanding explanations. For a man whose life had been ruled by fear of exposure, this patience was unsettling, but it was also disarming. Nolan began noticing his own triggers. When his voice rose, he paused. When insecurity crept in, he named it internally instead of projecting it outward. These were small victories, invisible to outsiders, but monumental to him. He started attending a men's group recommended by a colleague, something he never would have done before. Not because he was broken, but because he finally understood that strength without self-awareness was just another form of weakness. Evara watched this transformation without announcing it. She never reminded him of who he used to be. She let the old version fade quietly. That was her power. She did not heal him by control, guilt, or sacrifice, but by presence. And Nolan, slowly realizing what kind of woman stood beside him, felt something unfamiliar: reverence. Meanwhile, Lyra's absence echoed louder than her presence ever had. She told herself she had been misunderstood, that the couple had turned against her, that Evara had manipulated Nolan. But the truth followed her everywhere. The same patterns repeated in other homes, other friendships, other relationships. Wherever Lyra went, trust eventually fractured, and for the first time, she could not blame a village woman for it. One afternoon, Nolan returned home with news. He had spoken openly in his group about his marriage, about fear, control, and how close he came to losing everything. Evara listened quietly, pride soft in her eyes. That night, Nolan apologized, not with excuses, but with clarity. He named his wounds, he owned his cruelty. And for the first time, Evara did not feel like a woman surviving a marriage. She felt like a woman building one. The house changed. Laughter returned, not loud, not performative, but genuine. The walls no longer felt tense, and those scars remained, they no longer bled. What stood in their place was something rare. Two people choosing growth over ego, unity over image. Months later, the invitation arrived unexpectedly. Lyra had reached out, not to reconnect, but to apologize. Therapy had forced her to confront a truth she had spent years avoiding. She was drawn to confident women, not to learn from them, but to compete with them. She entered marriages as a mirror of inadequacy, dismantling homes to reassure herself she still had power. Evara read the message without emotion. Healing had taught her discernment. Compassion did not require access. She responded kindly, briefly, and finally. There would be no meeting, no closure conversations, no reopening of doors that had been sealed with wisdom. Nolan supported the decision without hesitation. That alone showed how far they had come. Life moved forward, not dramatically, but steadily. Nolan's confidence no longer depended on dominance. Evara's strength no longer required endurance of pain. Together, they had rewritten the story others assumed would end in ruin. In the end, the greatest shock was not Lyra's downfall or Nolan's change. It was Evara, the woman once dismissed as local, the woman whose silence was mistaken for ignorance. She emerged, not louder, not flashier, but deeper. She had outgrown everyone who underestimated her. And the lesson settled gently but firmly. Class is not found in accents or boldness. Strength is not proven through control. And wisdom often lives in the woman who listens long enough to understand before she decides to walk away or stay and heal.
Time did what arguments never could. It revealed truth. Nolan no longer flinched at disagreement. When mistakes happened, he corrected them without rage. When fear surfaced,
He spoke it instead of disguising it as authority. The house that once echoed with tension now held something steadier. Trust, built slowly, deliberately, without performance. Ivara's transformation was quieter, but deeper. She no longer measured herself through Nolan's approval or the absence of conflict. She had learned the difference between endurance and wisdom. Staying had not been weakness, it had been a calculated choice made with insight, patience, and emotional intelligence. And she knew this truth without needing anyone to confirm it. One evening, Nolan admitted something he had never said out loud. He feared becoming invisible. As a child, praise came only when he impressed. Love was conditional. Failure meant abandonment. Somewhere along the line, he learned that if he did not dominate the narrative, he would disappear from it. Ivara listened without interrupting. She did not reassure him with promises. Instead, she reminded him, gently, that he had already failed, publicly, privately, and internally. And yet, he was still standing, still respected, still loved. That realization anchored him. His greatest fear had already come to pass, and it had not destroyed him. From that moment, Nolan stopped running from vulnerability. He embraced it, and the marriage flourished not because pain vanished, but because honesty replaced fear. Elsewhere, Lyra struggled with the weight of self-awareness. Therapy stripped away her excuses. She was forced to confront the cycle she repeated, entering strong women's lives, feeding insecurity, thriving on chaos, and living destruction. For the first time, she understood that the emptiness she felt was not caused by others' success, but by her refusal to build her own. She tried reaching out again. This time, there was no reply. Silence met her. And in that silence, Lyra finally understood what Ivara had mastered long ago. Not every ending needs confrontation. Some endings need boundaries. Years later, when people spoke of Nolan and Ivara, they spoke with quiet admiration, not because the marriage looked perfect, but because it looked real. They had scars but no secrets, differences but no contempt. Growth had replaced competition. Respect had replaced fear. Nolan often wondered what would have happened if Ivara had walked away. He knew now that not every woman would have stayed, and he understood something even deeper. Many city women would have fought, shouted, or left. Few would have studied the wound before deciding how to respond. That was Ivara's power. She healed without losing herself. Ivara never claimed victory. She never exposed Lyra publicly. She never narrated her sacrifices. She simply lived well. And that, more than anything, became the final answer to every insult she had ever swallowed. The so-called village woman had been the most civilized person in the room all along. She understood restraint. She understood timing. She understood that love without wisdom is dangerous, but wisdom without love is empty. She chose both. Lyra, now deep in her healing journey, carried a different lesson. She learned that you cannot borrow confidence by destroying others. You cannot feel superior by shrinking someone else. And until you face your own wounds, you will keep mistaking envy for empowerment. The story ends not with applause, but with truth. That marriages fail most times, not because of background, but because of unhealed fear. That betrayal often wears the face of friendship, and that the strongest woman is not the loudest, but the one who knows when to fight, when to stay,
and when to quietly change the direction of her life. Because in the end, real class is revealed not in how you speak, but in how you love, how you heal, and how you choose peace when chaos offers you applause.